Ryan,
Tony, and Crystal.
We can't guarantee that you're gonna look great, but if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better hit the gymwits.
That's right, man. Tell 'em.
welcome to the Gymwits podcast. I'm Ryan George,
I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic.
and we are the Gymwits.
Well, sadly, it's here, winter in New York. I know we always complain about the weather, and we're going to keep on doing so. It is cold. I felt like we didn't even have, there was like no fall.
Yeah, I think we've
Very,
had
very
milder
little.
falls, but still, it's not that bad yet. I'm okay.
It's not freezing, but
Yeah.
it's like you go outside and you're like, oh,
it's
man,
not
cold.
pleasant, but I'm okay. Look, I was in Alaska in the summer, and it sucked. So I'll take this. I'm good. My biggest issue with more is like when it snows really bad, because then you have a hard
You
time
don't have a
walking
car to
through.
dig out.
No,
so
yeah,
you have no reason to
exactly.
complain.
And B, then when it's all slushy and slimy, and then you
Yeah.
gotta like step in those little puddles, and it's just gross. So I think like that's when I'll really be miserable about the winter. But otherwise, like you
Moving
can
to
you
Southern
can always wear
California.
layers. Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
But
So-
otherwise, it's not. I'll refrain from my.
You're not going to
weather
complain about it that
complaints.
much.
Yeah.
Well, we have to keep the trend going.
Yeah, I guess so. Right. Like if there's somewhere there's like
We're
a
New
drink,
Yorkers. We need to complain about something.
There's some drinking game right now, which is like, okay, we take a shot for every time the.
Oh, yeah,
the
it's a good
Gymwits
idea.
complain About it. Yeah, no, it's not a good idea.
So today we have a really wonderful interview. It's from author Gin Stephens, and she has written the Smash Success, Delay, Don't Deny. It's about intermittent fasting. She's incredibly knowledgeable, so enjoy the interview with Gin.
And just what before we get started, just a little heads up. There was some slight audio issues, so it's nothing crazy, but might get a little jumpy at spots. So just a heads up. It's still it sounds great, but if you do hear a little bit of jumpiness, sorry, we didn't catch it unfortunately while it was going on. But otherwise, it's a great interview. Enjoy. And without further ado, here's Gin.
Hey everyone, we are here with Gin Stephens. How's everything, Gin?
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be here with y'all.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on the Gymwits. Now, Gin is the author of the Smash Success, Delay, Don't Deny, and she has a newer book as well, Feast Without Fear. So very exciting stuff, and we are going to talk about intermittent fasting. But before we get into that, we always ask our guests about their background in fitness and health, whether you got into it last year or you started playing sports when you were 2 years old.
Well, that is a great question. And I am a 49-year-old woman, so there's just a little bit of background there so you'll know where I'm coming from. But, my interest in food and eating, I think started at the knee of my mother. Probably a lot of women have that same story. My mother was a ballet dancer and a dance teacher. So I grew up at a dance studio, and maintaining your weight was always something in that was expected and, encouraged. So I watched my mother count calories. I watched her do Weight Watchers. I watched her over the years diet, and that piqued my own interest in it. Even when I was, in high school and I was very, scrawny, I was a scrawny kid. I, got interested in counting calories because that's just seemed like what you should do. Right. And then, in the 90s, I counted my fat grams like everybody was doing. And I read every diet book that ever came out. And then I counted my carbs like everybody, I was always jumping on the latest diet trend. And as I got older, it got harder and harder to lose the weight until I found myself obese. I was 210 pounds at one point, and really at a point of despair in my life. And all the diets I'd tried before just really were failing me. So that's to make a very long story short. I just skipped about 45 years there. I've just always been very interested in different diets and foods and how they affect the body.
Great. And so before we get into the meat of the discussion, you're a teacher, correct?
Well, I am now a retired teacher.
You're retired.
It's so exciting to tell you. I taught
you're always gonna be a
elementary.
teacher.
Yeah, well, that's true. You can't get teaching out of your out of your blood, just ask my husband. But yes, I taught elementary school for 28 years, and because of the success of the book, which is very exciting, I was able to retire a couple years early, which is nice. So I'm officially retired and having a second career, really.
That's wonderful.
So can you tell us about, I guess, how did your second career get started? Like, where was how did you make the decision to write the book? And how did you really decide that, this is what I'm going to pursue?
It all kind of happened by accident, which sounds crazy. I didn't set out to, start an intermittent fasting world and have, large intermittent fasting support groups on Facebook we have, 140,000 members from around the world in our groups combined. And it really just started with me doing intermittent fasting, lose weight, and realizing that there's a great deal of support in Facebook support groups that can really help me as someone who was, trying to lose the weight. And also we can kind of support and help one another. I did intermittent fasting off and on from 2009 to 2014, and I never did make it, quote, stick. I couldn't stick with it. I was treating it as a temporary diet, as a quick fix kind of a thing, like, the other diets that we're used to trying. And it wasn't until 2014 when, I was on Facebook and I found some Facebook support groups, not my own, but I joined some. And that really appeared to be the missing link for me, having that support of the people that were going, that were doing it, going through the same things. Because, back in those years, 2009 to 2014, intermittent fasting was not, in any way, shape, or form mainstream. People thought it was absolutely crazy. There were a few books out there, but, they were few and far between. So, I did intermittent fasting myself. I lost the weight. I've gone on to lose over 80 pounds, by the way, and have been able to keep it off pretty much effortlessly since 2015. But in 2015. In 2015, I started my first Facebook support group that was really just going to be a place for me and for my friends to chat. We were doing kind of a 1 meal a day intermittent fasting approach in a window of about 5 hours, where you eat one actual meal. And I wanted a place where we could just really focus on that. And that was where it all started. Then over the next year, as I managed the Facebook support group, we found that people were asking the same questions. People wanted to know how to get started. And so I don't know if you've been in any Facebook support group, but there's something called a pinned post where you put all the information for someone. Yeah. And it just kept getting longer and longer and longer and crazier and crazier. And I had been kind of playing around with the idea of a book, and I'd outlined it and I'd written some chapters. And I'm like, really what I want is a book that I can hand somebody who wants to know how to start intermittent fasting. Because there were books out there, like I said, but I didn't agree with everything in all of them. Like, this one would be good, but I don't agree with when it says this, or, the science shows us that really, no, you don't want to have, a diet soda in your fast, and here's why. And so there just wasn't one resource I could hand anybody, like a friend who wanted to get started. And of course, as I lost the weight and maintained it, more and more friends wanted to know how to do it. So that's really how it started. And then, the book took off, and, if you search intermittent fasting on Amazon, it's like the second thing that comes up, which is still surreal to me. And so, it just snowballed, and I was busier and busier, and the Facebook groups got bigger and bigger. And so I was trying to teach full time and also manage these groups with all these people. And I couldn't do both. So I was suffering, both parts were not getting my full attention. So fortunately, I was able to retire from teaching, and now I devote myself full time to intermittent fasting and supporting others.
Cool. So I guess we've talked about this a few times over the years, but if you can give our listeners kind of little bit of a background on kind of what is intermittent fasting, and if you can explain how it works, that would be great.
Yeah. Intermittent fasting is the terminology that we're most familiar with. Recently, a lot of people have started calling it time-restricted eating, because they feel like that sounds just, a little more palatable. Because you hear the word fasting, people are like, what? It sounds like, 40 days and 40 nights or something, in the desert. But intermittent fasting just means you're going to intermittently have periods of time where you do not take in foods of any type, calories, as if you will. And you also don't want to take in anything that's going to provide energy for your body or cause your body to release insulin, because the whole point of being in the fasted state is that we keep our insulin low during the fast and we are able to tap into our stored fat effectively. So there are many ways you can structure intermittent fasting. A daily eating window approach is the one that I think the most people are familiar with. I eat within a window of about 5 hours. Even now, at my goal weight, in maintenance, I just feel better. My eating window is about 5 hours or less, and I eat one actual meal within that. I usually have a snack and a meal. Some people do really well with an eating window of up to 8 hours. And of course, you time that from your first bite of food of the day or first caloric beverage. And that's when your eating window would start. And then at the end of when you've taken in your last bit of food, your last caloric beverage of the day, that's when you close your window. So it's that time in between there that counts. Now, there are other approaches, alternate daily fasting where you have every other day, where one day, and with those plans, a lot of them got started where you were really actually doing more of a calorie restricted plan on the alternate days, where you would have 500 calories one day, and then the next day you would, quote, eat normally. That's a traditional alternate daily fasting protocol. There are others, 5-2 is one that's been popularized and has been around for years. That's where you have 2 days a week where you have those lower calorie days, or some people just do full fasts on those 2 days a week. And then the other 5 days you would, quote, eat normally. But the key to really, I think, having success is keeping the fast clean, because you really don't want to do anything that would interrupt your body getting into, tapping your fat stores effectively.
So I guess we had this question later, but I guess we'll ask this now. Well, I guess the two questions that you brought up that we'll kind of touch on now then is, I guess, one, if you can explain the importance of insulin and how it does impact our diets and our weight loss goals, and then what do you mean by a clean fast, and what foods kind of so let's say if I'm during the fast, does water count? Does coffee count? Does a diet soda count? So what would kind of count towards being in that fasted state, and what's okay to have while you're in that fasted state? So I guess two parts to that question, but if you could, that'd be great to answer.
Those are both great questions. And for me, I'll go back to tell my story a little bit, in that when I was losing the weight initially, I didn't understand the importance of keeping your insulin low during the fast. And so I was, putting stevia in my coffee. I was drinking flavored beverages. They were all 0 calorie, because we'd all been trained our whole lives, even from, like I said, my earlier days with my mother, it's calories, right? Calories are what make you gain weight. And so as long as it's 0 calories, you're fine. So that all changed in 2016 when I read The Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung. And he is a nephrologist out of Canada who works with a lot of really sick patients. Nephrology is kidney disease. So a lot of his patients come to him, and their kidney disease is secondary to having, type 2 diabetes, which leads to so many other health problems down the road. He found with his patients, they were just getting sicker and sicker over time. They had type 2 diabetes. The traditional protocol is you need more insulin. The higher your blood sugar gets, the sicker you are, will keep giving you more and more insulin. And he found that as he gave patients more and more insulin, which was the traditional standard of care, they would just get sicker and sicker and bigger. And so it might look like their diabetes was being managed, but they were gaining weight. So he did a lot of studying, and he talked about how, hey, it's the insulin, that's making them gain the weight. And so in order to tap into your fat stores efficiently, you need to keep insulin low. If you think about type 1 diabetic, especially in the past before they really understood what was happening, the type 1 diabetics would just, no matter what, their bodies weren't producing insulin, they would just lose weight no matter how much they ate, until eventually they would die, because their bodies couldn't process the foods that they were eating. So as I read the Obesity Code and understood the importance that insulin plays in fat storage and also fat loss, I realized that, the stevia I was putting in the coffee, the flavored beverages, they stimulate insulin release in our bodies. So I actually struggled with stubborn weight regain. After I lost my weight, I had 8 pounds that kind of piled back on. Then I read the obesity code, learned about how important it was to keep your insulin low. I stopped with the stevia. I stopped with all the other things and just started sticking to what we now call a clean fast, which is black coffee, plain teas, not, the special fruity ones, but the very plain teas, and water, and unflavored sparkling water. And immediately, I had been doing this for a while. I was not new to fasting, and I had reached my goal weight, even though I was struggling with weight regain. But the difference was just amazing. I immediately stopped having to white knuckle it through my fasts. I dropped that extra weight that I had regained. And ever since then, this was like March of 2016, and it's now November of 2018 that we're recording this. Ever since then, I have not struggled with weight regain. Fasting became easier. It's just made a huge difference. So, a lot of people are doing intermittent fasting around the world now. And, some people are like, it doesn't matter. You're not really going to have problems. Drink your diet sodas, put coconut oil in your coffee, have this, whatever. And they're maybe not seeing quite the results that they're expecting, or maybe fasting is hard for them. So in our intermittent fasting support groups on Facebook, we have found it makes a tremendous amount of difference when people start embracing the clean fast, that people are just kind of blown away when they start sticking to, just plain coffee, just plain tea, nothing sweetened, nothing flavored, not having your butter coffee or your coconut oil coffee. When you let your body really have a chance to just get into that fasted state, you're not, spiking your insulin with the flavors or with the sweeteners, it really makes all the difference in the world. Anecdotally, we've found that to be true.
Nice. So I have a reveal to make right now. Now, Ryan has been we're both 37 years old. Ryan has been my best friend since junior high school, so we've known each other for a long time. And, that's the podcast got started because we wanted to be a couple friends talking about fitness, and then it blew up. So it's funny how these things happen. But the reveal is to Ryan that I have started intermittent fasting.
Okay.
Yay!
Great. When did you start? 10 minutes ago?
No. I started a few days ago, believe it or not, because I wanted. There's actually a few reasons why. Not just weight loss. I'm at a fairly healthy weight, and I'm pretty athletic, but there are a few pounds I wanted to drop. And in the past, I have, if I really wanted to lose weight, I would do the super clean eating and the calorie counting. Not really like specifically counting calories, because I've always been athletic, and it was pretty easy for me to lose weight. I didn't have to really measure out the calories, but I knew if I would just eat really clean, sort of very healthy foods, like lots of vegetables, brown rice, and almost nothing junky, nothing high calorie or anything processed, then I would lose weight. I'm 37 now, so it's probably not quite as easy for me to lose the weight. But something that's always was difficult, even when I was doing that, was counting the calories. So why is the traditional concept of calorie in, calorie out so difficult to follow for people?
That's a great question. And really, the whole, theory of calories in, calorie out is based on, when you're in the lab and you're doing these experiments with different foods, they have a certain amount of energy contained in them. And so the theory is that our bodies are going to be able to extract all of the energy from these foods the same way that works in a lab. And so in a lab, if it has, 100 calories of energy, and your body will be able to get 100 calories of energy out of that food. And if that were true, then every food would be identical in the body, and it wouldn't matter what you ate. Like the professor who did the Twinkie diet, and he lost weight on the Twinkie diet, and his, conclusion was, see, it doesn't matter what you eat, it's just the calories. Well, we know that if you ate nothing but Twinkies for 20 years, your body would not be very healthy. No. Food's a lot more than just the calories that are in it. And the problem with calories in, calories out is that you can measure and count what you're putting into your body, But once the food gets into your body is not a closed system like that lab. So what your body does with the foods that you eat just can vary dramatically. Like the example I gave earlier, the person with type 1 diabetes whose body is not producing insulin, and they would literally waste away and die. Is it because they're not eating enough calories? Well, it's because their bodies can't use the calories for energy because their body doesn't have insulin. You've got to have insulin in your body in order to, store or to use the foods that you're eating and get energy from them, and store it as fat. So another faulty part of it is the whole calories out part. Y'all are big in exercise and weight loss and, metabolic effects of working out, or that if you have more muscle, your body is going to be more metabolically active, burning more calories than someone who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
So calories out is another part of the equation that you can't micromanage that. Your body can do all sorts of things with the foods that you eat. If you ever want to really be fascinated by how interesting our bodies are and how different they are, do some reading on overfeeding studies. I read one. It was an overfeeding study of identical twins of all things. And so, mathematically, you would expect people to gain a pound every time they overeat 3,500 calories, right? That's what we've all been told.
Yeah.
But in this overfeeding study with twins, they found that that's not really how it worked for anybody. Some people gained a whole lot less than they would have mathematically been expected to gain. And some people actually gained more, those poor people. But what really tightly was linked was how the twins did. Like the twins did a similar thing, like one twin and the other twin had a similar response to the overfeeding. But when you read that study, and they were in a setting, they were in a closed setting, they were their foods were provided to them. It wasn't one of those where they have to self-report. They were given their meals after having their bodies analyzed for caloric, quote, burn, and what the metabolic rate was. It just really showed that we just don't know what your body is going to do with those calories. Some of the twins, as I said, their bodies ramped up their metabolic rate and burned off the excess calories that they ate. So it was fascinating.
It's interesting. And one part of the book that I found really interesting is when you reference the Biggest Loser subjects.
Right.
And how you would lose weight in this ridiculous amount of time, but they don't have a reunion show for a reason. It's because they've all gained it back. So what's sort of the concept behind losing the weight fast and then now having this old screwed up metabolism where now you need to eat even less calories in order to maintain the norm?
Right. And that's what we've all experienced with diets before. You count the calories, you lose the weight, and then when you get to your goal, you regain it again. That was that cycle that I was on my whole life. And they did the Biggest Loser study. It came out in 2016, and it was all over the news. And really, some of the tone of the news articles was like, well, heck, why even bother? If your metabolism is just going to be slower, why even try to lose the weight? Because you're not going to be able to keep it off. So they found in the study that the people who had been on the Biggest Loser show, and they followed them years later, their metabolisms were lower than they would have been for their newly established weight. Like, for example, we know that a smaller body takes less energy than a larger body. But if you predicted how much energy their now smaller bodies would take based on those formulas, they were actually having to eat 500 calories less than that. So it caused them about 500 calories a day of, quote, metabolic damage. So the difference with intermittent fasting is that based on the research that we've seen, it keeps your metabolism kind of at the higher rate. You don't lower, because your body can, when you're fasting, it can look around and say, hey, we have plenty of stored energy here on our bodies, and you're tapping into that stored fat, and so your body doesn't feel the need to lower your metabolic rate. You've got plenty of energy stored on your body. And it was only with the frequent eating, all the time, that your body kind of lost track of that. You can't really sense what's there because you're constantly in that fed state.
So, I guess getting back to intermittent fasting, I guess where's the science on it? Because I think it's one of those things. Obviously, it's still fairly relatively new, kind of in the diet and health and wellness industry. And it feels like every few weeks there's a new study on intermittent fasting. Some, I haven't seen many that say it's a bad thing, but there's some that say it's great. And then others, like there was one that came out this week that kind of said it works, but it's no better than any other kind of calorie restricted diet. So I guess where would you say the science is right now as far as intermittent fasting goes?
Yeah, I think when we read any scientific study, it's so important to really dig in and understand the methods. I have a chapter on this in my second book, Feast Without Fear, and it really becomes comical when you start looking at the studies and seeing what they claim that the study proved, and then you see what they actually did in the study. You're like, wait a minute, that's not what they tested at all. For example, there's one that's out right now that people are, like you said, quote, intermittent fasting no better than other diets, for weight loss. Well, there was a whole like what they claimed that the participants were doing, and then when you dig down into it, they weren't really. They weren't really fasting. They were supposed. This was, I think, based on the 5-2 method that I talked about earlier, where you have those 2 days where you're supposed to have the 500 calories a day. Well, they were not really limiting themselves to 500 calories a day. They were eating like 1,000 calories a day instead. So when you start looking into the methodology, you're like, well, they weren't really fasting at all.
Yeah.
But yet the headline shows fasting not effective for weight loss. Everybody's like, oh, see, I told you.
Yeah.
So that's the problem that is really looking into those studies. What we're hearing more than anything, though, is fasting being studied, for Alzheimer's prevention or for reducing inflammation. I like to call intermittent fasting as the health plan with the side effect of weight loss. For me, my inflammation has decreased so much that I no longer have seasonal allergies, which is kind of remarkable because I suffered with those for, so much of my life. It was really terrible. And now I don't even take allergy medicine during peak allergy season, and I live in Augusta, Georgia, where we have a lot of pollen. So my health has been impacted, dramatically. Yes, I lost the weight. I'm sitting here in my size 0 jeans, which is fun. We love that. But I'm so healthy, and I feel, vibrant and young. And I think that's what's important to know. The research is showing that intermittent fasting is great for more than just losing weight. So even if you hear a study that says intermittent fasting no more effective for weight loss than other diets, well, how much did you enjoy those other diets? Did you want to do them for the rest of your life? Well, I want to eat this way for the rest of my life because I feel better doing it.
Yeah.
So even if the weight loss was, no more effective, which I think that's true, but even if that were true, it's so much more than just, losing fat.
So just to piggyback off that, that's actually one of the reasons why I've decided to take up intermittent fasting. I'm doing basically an 18-hour fast every day. I think that for my lifestyle, that works really well. So that's what I've decided to do. And part of it is because I have some issues, nothing serious, but I believe that it's going to help those. Right. And I know I'm not a doctor, and I've talked to a couple doctors about it, and it's always interesting what doctors will tell you different things. But I've decided to give it a shot. So I think that it will certainly help with some issues that I have. And speaking of, what are some other I guess what you would call non-scale victories,
right,
that people have reported from fasting?
Okay, that's a great question. And I do want to add one thing. I am married to an organic chemist. He's got a PhD in organic chemistry, and he has been so thin his whole life, like very lean. He was still wearing the same pants that he wore when we got married because he never gained any weight. But he now does intermittent fasting just for the health benefits. Yeah. So he's been sold on it personally, just, watching me and seeing what happens. All right. So what other victories, non-scale victories, do people see? Really, some of them are like unbelievable. You wouldn't even believe it if people have scars going away, which sounds remarkable. Like people will come into Facebook groups. They're like, I had a C-section 20 years ago and my scar has been raised and bumpy and now my scar is flat for the first, crazy stuff. That sounds like unbelievable. Like you wouldn't put that in a book because it sounds fake. People see reduced inflammation. There are all sorts of people who, and of course, I am not a medical doctor. As I said, my background is elementary education, even though I do have a master's in science teaching and science education. But people are seeing, type 2 diabetes gone. Their A1C is down. Just so many health factors are improving. Mental clarity during the fast, that's my favorite part. That's why I'll never go back. Even if I could go back to, eating all day long, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks, and maintain my weight, if I could do that, I wouldn't. Because I feel so much better when I go through the day in the fasted state. I have great mental clarity. I have great energy. I can do anything I need to do with this energy that I've got. And, I can run and move and jump and lift. I mean, I'm not a gym goer. When I say lift, I mean like I'm lifting the San Pellegrino case from my car to bring it into the house, but I can do anything I need to do. One thing that really is striking that a lot of people say is it's emotional victory. The feeling of finally being free from restrictive thoughts about food. I'm sure you've heard about, decision fatigue and how over the course of a day we make so many decisions and that you can actually wear yourself out. By the end of the day, you're tired of making those decisions. And with food, it's like that. If you're eating, a traditional low-calorie diet or whatever kind of diet, and you wake up in the morning and you're having to restrict yourself, and then during the day you're restricting yourself. All day long you're making decisions about food and having to restrict. By the end of the day, you're like, forget it. I'm done. And then people have like their nightly binges or whatever.
And not to mention the guilt that's involved if you stray from your so-called diet.
Well, with intermittent fasting, you don't have those decisions to make all day because you're fasting. Yeah. And I know that sounds crazy, like it's hard, but it's not. It's actually easier than having to make all those, dozens of decisions. Should I have another cup of coffee with cream and sugar? Should I have a snack from the pastry cart? You're not having that. And you feel so good. And so you don't want it. And then by the time your eating window is open, you actually reconnect with your satiety hormones like you're supposed to. Have like how we all, we're born with these ability to stop eating when we've had enough, but we lose touch with them over the way of our life. But with intermittent fasting, you connect with those again. Yeah. And so you stop eating. You've had enough to eat. And you're like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, we've talked about this plenty of times over the years doing the podcast, but we're kind of humans are limited to the, not that we're limited to the decisions, but kind of there's a bank of kind of choices that we have to make throughout the day, and the more that you make, you kind of reach a point of almost like decision fatigue. Right. And so I do find that myself, when you do that and you eliminate that process for an entire chunk of the day, it's much easier to make that, the choice of, it's much easier to make the one choice of I'm going to have this meal versus the dozens of times that you're going to decide to or not to, or go back and forth. And then also it just saves money. Like I'm a very kind of compulsive eater, and I would find that like when I ate breakfast first thing in the morning, I'd eat breakfast, then I'd snack, and all of a sudden before my lunch, I'd spent a good amount of money, and especially it adds up throughout the week on food. And I've found now if lunch is the first meal, lunch is the first meal, so I don't think about that. And there isn't that hunger. I tend to look forward to that lunch, but I'm not freaking out over not eating. It's just I've saved a good amount of money that morning, not eating junk.
Exactly. And I don't open my window until usually sometime after 4 p.m. So for me, like I'll open my window with a snack sometime at 4, and then I'll have dinner later. But, just during the day, you're just cruising along. And sometimes I'll say, oh, what time is it? Not time to eat yet, but that's fine. And if I'm busy, I might look up and it's 6 p.m. and I haven't had anything yet. That can happen too.
So now I guess, we won't get into tons of detail because obviously you can go a lot into this, and I'd rather our listeners buy the book, and I'm sure you can get more information. But when it comes to a protocol, obviously there are different protocols. So like you do a short window later in the day. There's some people that will do an 8-hour window. There's some people that will do 10. But as far as it kind of where the research is and where the science is, like what is an appropriate window? If it's like, oh, I'm just going to fast 8 hours, but that 8 hours is when I'm sleeping. Does that really count? Is it a minimum 14-hour window? Is it a minimum 16-hour window? Like what is that window for the fast to actually make intermittent fasting effective?
That's a great question. And I've seen the number 12 thrown around as far as if somebody just start with 12 hours of fasting and then a 12-hour eating window just as the basics to see some health benefits. Mm-hmm. Now, Are you going to see health benefits with that? Probably. You're going to lose weight? Probably not, because that's not different probably than a lot of people live anyway. By the time you go to bed and wake up, it's been 12 hours between eating experiences. But I've just seen that thrown around, some scientists saying, start with 12. For most people, 16-hour daily fast is a really good place to start, as far as if you really want to start getting into fat burning. And, some people are going to be able to get into fat burning with a 16-hour window. Some of us are not. That was never working. A 16-hour fast, an 8-hour eating window. I think I said that backwards. That was not enough fasting for me. An 8-hour eating window is too long for me. For me, a 5-hour eating window was a great place to really find my rhythm. Some days my eating window will be 2.5 hours long. Another day it really might be 7 because I have, a special event that day. The thing about intermittent fasting is it's flexible and it's very personalized. So if the question is, what is the best eating window that is applicable across all people? The answer is there is not one. And, we tend to look for absolutes with anything, okay, well, this is what's the best. Everyone should have a 1-hour window and that's you'll lose more fat. Well, no. For some people, having a 1-hour eating window is way too much stress on their body. And how do you know? Well, if you start to feel worse and stressed about food and you're, having a hard time with it, then that's too much for you. You may need to back off, and, more is not always better in that regard. Whereas, for some people, a 3-hour window might be their sweet spot. Some people do better with an evening eating window like I do. But, there are plenty of people who do better with an early in the day eating window. I know people, they like to wake up, they eat their big breakfast, and they're done with food for the day, and they go about their day, and that eating window works very well for them. There's some talk in the intermittent fasting research world that an early window may have some metabolic advantages with circadian rhythm and that sort of thing. But even so, I want to say the best window is the one you're going to stick to long term. Even if, scientists came out and said we're 100, which of course we're never 100% sure with anything with the human body and the research with that goes. But if they said 100% we're sure the best eating window is 8 a.m. to noon, and that's when everyone should eat, and only eat between 8 and noon. See, that wouldn't work for me, because I know personally that when I have an eating window early in the day, I struggle with hunger late in the evening that's really hard for me to manage. I've tried to have an earlier window when I, working around events, like if I have a special brunch, I'm like, I'll just eat this brunch and then I'll be fine. That doesn't work for me. So, the best eating window is the one that feels like a lifestyle to you and that allows you to get the results you're looking for. If you start off with an 8-hour window and it feels great for you and you do it for a couple months and you've lost 0 pounds, well, that is not going to be your weight loss protocol. Maybe that's a great maintenance window for you. But if you want to lose weight, tighten up a little bit. It's all about tweaking and finding what works for you. And also what works for you one season of your life may not work forever. I actually have had to make my window a little bit longer now that I'm in maintenance, just because, I don't have as much fat stored on my body. And so my body will tell me one day, hey, you need to eat a little more today. And so I'll open my window earlier and I'll have 2 meals that day. You really get good at listening to your body's signals. Instead of feeling like, man, I blew it. I ate 2 meals today and in an 8-hour window. And no, that's just what I needed that day.
So what would you tell someone who's considering doing an intermittent fasting plan, who's thinking, well, I can give myself a 3-hour window to eat, but during that time, it's all out. I can eat Doritos and cake, lots of alcohol, soda.
Yeah.
What's the idea behind the choices of what you actually eat?
That's a great question, because we know that real food nourishes our bodies, and that Doritos and cake and sodas are not going to nourish your body. We know that's true. And a lot of people do kind of go a little crazy at first when they start intermittent fasting. My book is called Delay, Don't Deny. And people sometimes think that means go hog wild. Like you said, that there's no amount of food that could be too much. And that's not true. You can absolutely overeat in an eating window and not lose weight. And you're not going to be your best health self if you're eating nothing but junk, because our bodies need nutritious food. But a lot of people find, especially if you come from a place of restriction for years and years and years, you've been dieting for a long time and you've been denying yourselves all the foods you want to eat, based on whatever diet you were following at the time, you might find at the very beginning that you do overdo it. One of my favorite intermittent fasting experts is Dr. Bert Herring. He's who I started following early in my fasting journey. He wrote the book Fast 5 and also a book called Appetite Correction. He talks about the early days of fasting. You'll have something he calls compensatory overeating, and that is where you're not adjusted yet to the fasting. Your body's not accessing your fat stores well yet, and so when your window opens, you may just go crazy and just eat everything that's not nailed down. And that is actually normal as your body is adjusting. And so people sometimes even gain weight at first. But then a funny thing happens. And he talks about this in his second book, Appetite Correction. He actually coined that phrase, but it is genius and I love it. As your body gets used to the fasting, you experience something called appetite correction. And that's where your satiety signals are back in balance. And you no longer have the desire or even the ability to overeat like that because your body says, whoop, had enough, and then you stop. The very first time you plan to have ice cream for dessert and then you realize you don't want it because you're full and you're like, who am I? What is this magic? So if you can just trust the process that will go by the wayside. A lot of people have found that to be true. For me, my tastes in food have changed dramatically. I really did eat a lot of, fast food and junk food, and I can hardly even remember being that person, but I lost my first, 75, 80 pounds of this weight loss without really trying to eat, quote, healthier foods. I went through McDonald's drive-through more than I would like to admit during that period of time, but I did lose the weight. I'm sure I wasn't, in my optimal health at that time, but now that food doesn't appeal to me, and it's not because, someone told me I needed to change what I eat. My body eventually started asking for better foods. We find that is almost universal. People who start off eating just those fun foods that they thought that they were missing all those years, then you're like, wait, that's not so fun. I don't even like that anymore. So I think if I went back in time 3 years to the person I was, or 4 years, my plate looks completely different now. And it's not because I meant to do it. It's just a very interesting process.
So what would you tell someone who's considering starting an intermittent fasting plan, but they're saying, but what about on holidays where I'm with family and we eat different meals and, I like to drink a little bit. What's the deal with that? Like someone says, well, I can't, we eat 2 meals a day, or something we eat all day, during Christmas or something like that. What would you tell those people?
Well, I would tell those people that special occasions, you set your fasting aside and you celebrate with your family. Because I have a chapter in Delay, Don't Deny that talks about this. It's, fasting is a lifestyle, not a religion. You don't have to repent of your sins or go to fasting jail or anything like that. On Christmas Day, I always go over to my parents and we have brunch. And once my window is open, like I said earlier, I have a harder time closing my window. That's why an early window doesn't work well for me, because once it's open, I'm eating. So on Christmas Day, I'll eat, brunch. I'll have, we go to another family member's house and there's food there and I'll eat that there. And, I may have a 12-hour eating window on Christmas Day, but boy, the next day I'm ready to get back started with fasting because it just feels better. And I don't have to do an extra long fast or punish myself or eat, carrot sticks. I just jump right on the fasting wagon because it's a lifestyle. And there's no guilt. That's the thing. We just had Thanksgiving here in the U.S. and people said, it was just amazing. People who in the Facebook group were talking about how they handled Thanksgiving. And they're like, for the first time in my life, I enjoyed Thanksgiving without feeling like, I need to make up for it. I had the pie. Unfortunately, I could only eat 2 bites because I was too full, but I stopped. People were reporting that it was life-changing of how they experienced the holiday.
So tell us about your Facebook group and who is it for? What kinds of people should join? Give us a little bit more information on that.
All right, that's a great question. I actually have several Facebook groups now. And the first one that I started was called 1 Meal a Day IF Lifestyle. That was the first one that I started in 2015. And that is for people who tend to use a 1 meal a day approach. And as I said, it's not, we don't like have a really strict window. Like you don't have to be 23-1. You don't have to have a 1 hour eating window. I do 1 meal a day within a window of about 5 hours. I have a snack and then I have a meal. We were the first 1 meal a day group on Facebook. And now there are a bunch of them. And a lot of them define 1 meal a day, very strictly, like 1 plate, 1 hour, whatever. We don't do that. As long as you're pretty much eating one meal, one real meal, we welcome you to our group. And you don't even really have to follow 1 meal a day. You could just be in our group and see what we're doing. That was my first group. Then after I wrote the book, I started Delay, Don't Deny Intermittent Fasting Support. And that was designed to be for people who had read the book as kind of a book support group. But what we found over time is that people joined that had not read the book. And of course, we're not going to kick you out for not reading the book. I hope you want to read the book, but we'll support you anyway. So I then started a third group called Delay, Don't Deny Advanced Book Support Group. And that is 100% just for people who've read the book. So you do get a different kind of level of support there because we're all coming from the same place. So those are the three groups. We'd love to see any of you there. There are membership questions that you have to answer. If you find the groups, you'll have to answer 3 membership questions for the first 2. And then for the book group, you have to prove that you've read the book with 1 question. So, but we love to have you there. It's a very amazing community. Facebook can go negative so quickly, but as large as our groups are with tens of thousands of members from around the world, we really have a very positive community that supports one another. And we're just all in there fasting together. There's always somebody up. Somebody might be up in New Zealand, which is you need support. And so it's literally 24/7.
Nice. I need to join the group later.
Please join the group. We'd love to have you there.
I will. Now, all right. So, a question that is not IF related. Now, you've worked with kids for a while,
Yep.
and you do not recommend that children or teens do intermittent fasting. It's just not good for them at that age. But we do have a obesity epidemic in this country, and much of that is also a childhood obesity epidemic. So there are a lot of children that are overweight. Clearly, we know what it's based on. It's not eating healthy, not being active, not being educated, maybe not having access to healthier food. What do you think are some things that we can do as a society to help our children to be healthier, to grow up healthier?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think back to my own childhood. I grew up in the 70s. I was born in 69, grew up in the 70s. We ate bad food. We ate, I remember having jelly sandwiches on white bread and Fritos, for lunch. I was eating processed food. It was not the best. And I was stick thin. But you know what we weren't doing? We weren't snacking all the time or eating constantly. We also weren't carrying around, these beverages all the time. I saw a classroom, I started teaching in 1990. And when I started, kids would come to school. I was the teacher. They would come to school. We would have the day. They would go to have lunch. Then they would come back to the classroom. Then they would go home. Over time, over the years, it became now the kids bring snacks to school. They have a water bottle that might have, a sweetened beverage in it, or some sort of water enhancer. They have a mid-morning snack. They have their lunch. Then some of them have a snack in the afternoon at recess, and then they're constantly in the fed state. There's a graph. I don't know if Dr. Jason Fung has it in his book, The Obesity Code, or not, or if I've just seen it on his blog. But it shows it's like a line graph. Okay, if you hear cats growling, I'm sorry, my cats are having a fight in the other room. Listeners, sorry about that. Anyway, it shows, like imagine the blood sugar going up and down, right? And then imagine there's a baseline. So it goes up when you eat, and then it goes back down below the baseline after you eat, and then it goes up and down. And we're sorry, I'm sure you hear that cat in the background.
What are the cats' names?
Okay, those are my 2 girl cats. That's Ellie and Lucy, and they are not friends, and they fight. So anyway, sorry about that. But all right, so back to that graph. If we used to just eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, no snacks, your body had a chance to go back down, kind of dipping into that, quote, fasted state between meals. So it all was kind of in balance. And now the kids are always up in that fed state. And so eventually it's going to come back to haunt them as they get older. And we're seeing kids in elementary school who are having, type 2 diabetes, that are obese, that are, they have that belly fat. And that's just a sign of metabolic problems. So what I would tell parents is, of course, eat real food. Back my jelly sandwiches and Fritos from the 70s, not the healthiest foods, of course. Give your kids real food. You want their gut microbiome to develop in a healthy way, and eating real foods, fruits, vegetables, things like that. Those are best. But also, I would stop the constant snacking. That is just not good for us. It's not how we're designed to be. And back in the 70s, we were not constantly snacking. And you rarely saw somebody, a child that was overweight. Are y'all there?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so now can you tell us, I guess you've mentioned books a couple of times, so if you can give the names of your books and where can people find the books?
Okay. Well, first book, if you're interested in getting started with intermittent fasting, start with Delay, Don't Deny, Living an Intermittent Fasting Lifestyle. The paperback is only available through Amazon. And the ebook, though, is available everywhere that ebooks are sold, every major ebook platform. It's also available on Audible, iTunes, that sort of thing. My second book is called Feast Without Fear, Food and the Delay, Don't Deny Lifestyle. And I wrote that because so many people say, well, what's the best thing we should eat? What foods are really best? What's a healthy diet? And in Feast Without Fear, I talk about how, believe it or not, there's not one best diet that suits all of us. It has to do with a lot of different factors. Our gut microbiomes are all different. We have different genetic factors. But over time, you can figure out what foods work best for you. I talk about blue zones, gut health, all sorts of interesting things in that book. I have a couple of podcasts. I know your listeners like podcasts.
Yes. Yeah. Tell us about the podcast, too.
One of them is called the Intermittent Fasting Podcast. And we have 80-something episodes of that as of right now. So you can find the Intermittent Fasting Podcast everywhere, you look at or listen to podcasts. I have a new one that just started November 1st. It's called Intermittent Fasting Stories. And I really love that podcast. Episode 5 will come out tomorrow. In fact, of course, not on the timeline that you're releasing that, but in the real world tomorrow. But in Intermittent Fasting Stories, I talk to people who live an intermittent fasting lifestyle, and we hear their stories. And so far, the people have really enjoyed listening to them. Cool. And so you can go to ifpodcast.com to find the first one, and intermittentfastingstories.com to find the second one. And my website is, my website is ginstevens.com, and that's GIN Stevens with a PH.com.
Awesome, Gin. Thank you so much for coming on the Gymwits. This was an excellent, really cool discussion, and I'm glad that you were able to grace our presence.
Well, I really enjoy being here, so I hope that your listeners decide to try out some intermittent fasting. And just the one thing I would like to tell them is, it's going to be hard at first. We promise it gets better, or none of us could do it. As your body is making that adjustment, be prepared for that adjustment period. And as I said earlier, the overeating at first is common, but trust us that it gets better over time. And then you can go a month, 2 months, 3 months, you'll be like, wow, I never want to go back to how I used to be.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you all.
So you and your reveals, it's funny though, because they're kind of anticlimactic, because there's this, you've done this a number of times, and you have this big buildup, you go back into we've known each other for this long, you start talking, it's oh wow, what are you gonna say, what's going on, and then it's I I've changed my workout, or I'm starting intermittent fasting. It's like a little, I don't know, it's a little anticlimactic.
I don't know. I thought that was pretty climactic.
I don't know about that. I disagree.
So how could I have made it more climactic?
I just don't think it deserved the, it's like one thing if you were like, yeah, I'm going to get I'm getting the gastric bypass surgery, or like, all right, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to start taking testosterone, something like that. Fine. I get it. But like, I just feel like it was a lot of buildup for a fairly benign reveal. I don't know. Maybe listeners don't agree.
Yeah, I guess it was fairly benign in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
But I think
good. So you really have started intermittent fasting?
Yes, I have.
And how's it going so far?
Going well.
Are you struggling at all with
I get hungry at night, even though...
So what's your window? Like what times are you...
So I eat either sort of 1-ish to 7-ish. So I'm doing an 18-hour fast, a 6-hour window, which usually means about 2 meals. I eat a slightly smaller meal earlier in the day, and then I have a big meal in the early evening, and that's it.
Okay, really? Yeah, I mean, that's good.
It works well for me. That's not too difficult.
Yeah, when I was doing it, I was sticking to about an 8 to 10 hour eating window. So I would do my lunch at 11:30, and then my last meal would be around, I guess, 8:30, 9:30, something like that. And my trouble is, though, that I had read, and so, I don't know, I meant to ask, but I'd read that you can get away with up to like 100 calories. So now I wonder if it's the sweet that matters, or if it's the calories that matter. So like, because I would have a coffee with milk. And so, the amount of milk was less than 100 calories or around 100 calories. But did that break my fast? Because I would always have that coffee with milk in the morning, and I probably should have asked that.
It's interesting. If you get a chance to read the book, she actually mentions that.
Yeah.
That some sources will even say you could have 500 calories during a certain types of fast. I think that the general consensus is, or for what Jen would probably tell you, and what a lot of her followers would say, from the Facebook group, is that they get the best results when it's completely a clean fast.
Yeah.
So when your body has nothing to draw from, that's when it starts burning the fat.
Okay, and that's a challenge because when we went to Israel, 10 years ago.
I know.
Insane. So we went to Israel, and it was part of a kind of birthright trip, and we had to eat kosher. And not that they were super strict about it, but we tried to stick with it. So like, I typically would drink coffee with milk, but for that period of time, I started drinking black coffee, and I kind of took to it. So for a couple years, I would do black coffee, but then I got back to drinking coffee with milk. So it's kind of hard for me to go, like, I really have a hard time with black coffee. I'm weird. Like, I can drink black coffee if it's my second cup of coffee of the day, but if it's my first cup, I really can't stand black coffee. It's really weird. I don't understand it. I don't know why, but I gotta try to. The other thing might be also the type of coffee. For example, like in the morning, I drink Dunkin' Donuts, and I find Dunkin' Donuts to be. I'm not a coffee snob, but Dunkin' Donuts is not very good coffee.
No, it's not.
So
that would be the problem.
Yeah, so the milk kind of tempers that a little bit, and it's palatable with the milk. But I feel like Dunkin' Donuts.
Maybe you need to get some more cat poo coffee.
Black Dunkin' Donuts coffee is just not good, and it's
sour and weird.
Yeah. So I feel like I have to have it. So maybe it's a matter of me maybe making the coffee myself, which will save me some money anyway. Yeah. But like for example, when I come here, we usually make a cup of coffee, but you have pretty good coffee, and so I'll just take it black. So I think that maybe that's it. So maybe I got to start like roasting the coffee or doing it at home.
Would you ever consider doing an intermittent fasting plan more so than what you've done?
No, I've been doing it. I mean, I kind of strayed. So once I went away, because again, I'm also weird with food. Like if I'm offered food, I'm going to eat it. So since breakfast, lunch, and dinner was catered, I was first thing in the morning. I was the first guy there eating breakfast. So and then once I got back, I'm kind of, I'm not. I'm not back to that. I'm back on that breakfast routine. So I would like to get back to it. More for me, like I said, like for me, it's all about choices. I think intermittent fasting is great because it limits your choices and it provides a certain amount of structure that I sometimes need. I think when I'm left to myself, I do struggle a little bit. So I like the structure of intermittent fasting. My issue is always whether I'm making good choices or bad choices for my meals. So and also saving money. I mean, I just spent, live in New York. I don't have time nor the motivation to prep food at home. So I'm eating out almost 100% of the time, except my stepson cooks a lot now, but he's vegan, and nothing against vegans, but he's a vegan that does not like vegetables. So
Whoa.
he doesn't like vegetables. He doesn't like sweet potatoes. So like, you know, what he ends up doing is
pasta or something like that.
I mean, so he makes a lot of stuff with pasta, a lot of stuff with rice, but then he does like you know, and I argue with him all the time. He's always making like a, you know, fake chicken or fake meat and I'm like, look, you know, just make me some stuff with vegetables, you know, or not make me, you know, just make some roast up some veggies and just season it well and throw in some rice and, you know, just make it nice and green or colorful and I'll be fine. I don't need you to fake a hamburger because I don't like that stuff because I know what a real burger tastes and it's not the same, you know. But he's stuck on the fake meat part, and I just feel like you know, it's weird. Not for me. It's like, look, stop trying to fake it. There's tons of great vegan dishes that you can make where you're not trying to fake, you know, meat dishes. Do that, but he doesn't like that stuff. So then we're stuck. So long story.
He'll find his way.
Me going on a long rant to basically just say, I spend a lot of money on food, so I find that intermittent fasting does help me with saving money.
There's another NSV, right?
NSV?
Non-scale victory.
Got it. Okay, cool. All right, well, anyway, I guess that's it. When this goes out, it is not New Year's yet, but it's probably going to go out on New Year's or the week after New Year's. So Happy New Year to you, and hope you had a nice holiday season. As usual, all of our stuff is at thegymwits.com. Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic, reminding you that truth does not sell.
And we are the Gymwits.